The woman who was stealing my father blind signed the papers on a Tuesday, and it was a Tuesday my father was not in the building. That is the whole story. Everything else is just how long it took me to see it. Stay with me because I want to tell you how a paid caregiver nearly took my father's entire life savings with a single sheet of notarized paper, how she almost got away with it, and how she was undone by the one thing she could not have known to check, which was where an 81-year-old man happened to be on an ordinary afternoon 11 months before I ever suspected a thing. My name is Marcus Bell, and I want to say something at the very front before I say anything else because it matters and because I have watched too many stories like mine get told the wrong way. The people who care for our parents when we cannot are, almost every one of them, saints. I mean that, in the years my father was in that facility, I met dozens of aides and nurses who did the hardest, lowest paid, most invisible work there is, who cleaned and fed and comforted and sat with dying strangers at 3 in the morning so those strangers would not be alone, and who did it for wages that would shame this country if it were capable of shame. This is not a story about them. This is a story about one person who used the exact trust those good people earn, the trust a family has to extend, as a doorway. The system is not the villain. The system is mostly mercy. The villain is the person who learns to walk through mercy like an unlocked door. Let me tell you about my father. Walter Bell worked 41 years as a machinist, the kind of man who could hold a part up to the light and tell you it was 2,000ths out of true, and he saved every spare dollar he ever made because he had grown up with nothing and swore his kids never would. He was careful his whole life. That is the cruelty of what happened, because the money that was nearly taken was the physical proof of a lifetime of a careful man denying himself, and it was nearly emptied by someone he thanked, out loud, for her kindness right up to the end. I lived 4 states away. I want to be honest about that because it is the soil the whole thing grew in. I called every Sunday. I flew out 3, 4 times a year. But I was not there on the ordinary days, and the ordinary days are where this kind of theft lives, in the long flat stretches of Tuesdays when no sun is watching, and I have had to make my peace with the fact that my distance was the opening, and that the person who did this counted on exactly that, counted on the guilty, grateful, faraway child who is so relieved someone is being kind to his father that he stops asking hard questions. Her name was Gina, and she was, for about 2 years, wonderful. That is the part nobody warns you about. She did not arrive as a thief. She arrived as the best thing that had happened to my father in that place. She remembered his coffee. She learned that he had been a machinist and she asked him about it, really asked, and he lit up in a way I had not seen since my mother died. And when I called on Sundays, he talked about Gina. Gina did this, Gina brought me that, and I felt, for states away, a flood of relief and gratitude so large that it never once occurred to me to be suspicious of it. Why would it? Somebody was being good to my dad. That is all a distant child prays for. The turn was slow, and I did not see it because it did not look like a turn. It looked like more kindness. Gina started handling things. Small things at first. She'd pick up items he needed so I wouldn't have to arrange it from far away. She knew a guy who could fix his hearing aid cheaper. She started, she said, just helping him keep his little accounts straight, because the statements confused him now and it upset him, and wasn't it better if someone he trusted just quietly took care of it so he didn't have to worry? And every single one of those steps was presented as a mercy, and every single one of them was true as a mercy and also a brick in a wall, and that is the thing I need you to understand about how this is actually done. It is not done by a monster. It is done by a helper who helps you right up to the edge of a cliff. I found out by accident, which is how almost everyone finds out, because these things are built to never be found out on purpose. I was doing my father's taxes, or trying to, and a statement came that didn't match my picture of his accounts, and I called the bank, and a patient woman walked me through the recent activity, and I sat in my kitchen 4 states away and felt the floor tilt. There were withdrawals, regular ones, payments to people and places I didn't recognize. Money moving in a way my careful father would never have moved it. And when I asked how any of this was authorized, the woman on the phone said the words that turned my stomach to ice. She said it was all authorized under the power of attorney on file. The power of attorney. I did not know there was a power of attorney. My father had one, a real one, done years earlier by a real lawyer, and it named me. I was my father's power of attorney. So what was this? And I got a copy, and I sat and I looked at a document I had never seen, dated 11 months earlier, in which my father, Walter Bell, appointed Gina Serrano as his attorney, in fact with broad authority over his finances, and it was signed in what looked like his hand, and it was notarized with a stamp and a signature, all of it clean, all of it regular, all of it, to any eye that looked at it, perfectly legal. I want to tell you what that does to you because it is worse than simple theft. If she had just stolen, I could have been angry cleanly. But she had made my father sign. Or something had made him sign. And so the first thing I felt was not rage at her, it was fear about him because a signed, notarized document says a competent adult chose to do this, and my father was not fully competent anymore, and the horror that opened under me was the possibility that my dad, confused, lonely, grateful, had genuinely signed away his life to the one person being kind to him, and that there was nothing false about the paper at all, that the theft was legal because the trust was real. That is the trap. That is why it works. The document turns the victim into the author of his own ruin. When I confronted the facility gently at first, they were sympathetic, but their hands were tied, because there was a valid POA on file, and Gina was, by that paper, entitled to do what she was doing. When I called a lawyer, he told me the grim truth, that undoing a notarized power of attorney is enormously hard, that I would have to prove either that my father lacked the capacity to sign it or that it was procured by fraud, and that both are expensive, slow, and usually lose because the person defending it simply says the old man knew exactly what he wanted and loved her and chose her over his absent son, and juries, and judges, and my own guilty heart all find that horribly easy to believe. And I want to stop here because this is the part of the story where I have to be honest about the worst thing, which is that for a while I believed it too. Sitting alone 4 states away, I wondered if my father had chosen her. She was there. I was not. She brought his coffee and I called on Sundays. Maybe some cold voice in me said, maybe he did sign it, maybe he trusted her more than you, maybe you have no right to be surprised. And she was counting on that voice. Everyone who does this is counting on that voice. The one that whispers to the faraway child that this is your fault, that you weren't there, that you don't get to come storming in now. That voice nearly stopped me. I want to say that plainly for anyone out there hearing this with that same voice in their own ear right now. That voice is the theft protecting itself. It is not truth. It is the lock on the door. If you have listened this far, let me ask you the thing I had to ask myself in that kitchen because it is the hinge of everything. When the paper is perfect, when the signature looks right and the notary is real and the law is on the other side, and even part of you half believes it, how do you find the truth? Do you accept the document because documents are how the world decides what is real? Or do you trust the thing underneath the document? The thing you know in your bones about your own father, even when every official piece of paper tells you you're wrong. Tell me in the comments what you would have trusted, the paper or the man, because I nearly trusted the paper, and the paper was a lie wearing the law like a coat. Here is what saved my father. It was not a lawyer, and it was not a hunch, and it was not justice arriving on its own, because justice does not arrive on its own. It has to be dragged into the room by a fact. It was a date. The power of attorney was dated the 14th. I kept looking at that date because something about it itched at me and I could not place it, and then one night I was going through the accordion folder of my father's medical paperwork, the mountain of it that a sick old man generates, and I found it. On the 14th, the exact day, my father had not been at the facility. He had been at the hospital 2 towns over for a scheduled procedure, admitted the night before, discharged the following day. It was documented 6 ways. There was an admission record with a timestamp. There was a wristband log. There was a transport record showing the medical van that took him and the one that brought him back. There was a nurse's note from the hospital in the hospital system describing my father by name in a hospital bed on the afternoon of the 14th. At nearly the exact hour the notary stamp said he was calmly signing a power of attorney in a room at the facility 12 miles away. He could not have signed it. It was not possible. He was not in the building. He was in a hospital bed with a plastic bracelet on his wrist and a chart being updated in real time by people who had no idea that 12 miles away, a document was being born with his name on it and a date that could not survive contact with a wristband. I want to tell you what that felt like, and it was not triumph, not at first. It was grief because it meant the thing I had feared, that my confused father had chosen her, was false, and the thing I had not let myself fully believe, that someone had simply forged an old man's name and had it stamped as real, was true. My father had not signed away his life. Someone had signed it away for him and dated it on a day the universe happened to have him somewhere else on the record, in a system that does not lie and cannot be charmed. Because that is the thing they never account for. A person like Gina spends all her energy on the people, on the trust, on the warmth, on the slow, patient work of becoming the one everyone believes. She managed my father, she managed the faraway son, she managed the overworked staff, she managed the notary, and she was good at all of it. But she could not manage the hospital's admission system 12 miles away. That system did not know her. It did not love her. It had never tasted her coffee or heard her kindness. It just recorded coldly, indifferently, that Walter Bell was in bed 4 on the afternoon of the 14th, and that one cold, indifferent fact was heavier than every warm thing she had built for 2 years, because the warm things were a performance and the record was just true. The notary, it turned out, had not committed fraud, not knowingly. This is worth saying because people always want a wider conspiracy. The notary had notarized a signature presented by a trusted facility caregiver who said the resident had signed in her presence, and the notary, busy, trusting, took her word, which is exactly the kind of small, ordinary trust that the whole world runs on and that a person like Gina exists to exploit. There was no ring. There was just one person willing to walk through every unlocked door of everyone else's decency. And I want to say something about the signature itself because people always ask how she got his name on it, and the answer is smaller and sadder than any clever forgery. My father had signed things for her for months. Cards. Little forms. The permission slips of an old man's life, the this and that a helpful caregiver hands you to sign. Here, Walter, just sign here, it's nothing, and he did because he trusted her, because signing where Gina pointed had become one more small safe ritual of his day. She did not need to be a master forger. She had a man who would write his name wherever she put her finger, and had been quietly gathering his signature, real and genuine and freely given, on nothing in particular, for the better part of a year. Which means that even the signature was, in a sense, real. That is the horror of it that I keep circling back to. Almost nothing about the crime was fake. The kindness was real, the trust was real, the signature was real, the notary was real. Only the date was a lie, and only because the universe happened to keep a record she forgot existed. If my father had been in the building that Tuesday, every single thing on that paper would have been true enough to bury him. And I want to tell you about a different aide, because I owe her a place in this story and because I will not let this become a story that poisons you against caregivers. Her name was Rose, and she worked the same floor as Gina, and when it all came out, Rose was the one who cried, not for herself, for my father, and she told me something I have never forgotten. She said, "We see it sometimes. We see the ones who get too close to the money. But we're the lowest people in the building, Mr. Bell. Nobody believes the aide over the paperwork." Rose had suspected. Rose had no power to be heard. And I think about how the same closeness, the same daily tenderness, exists in both women, in the thief and in the saint, and the entire difference is what they did with a trust that was handed to both of them equally. Rose emptied bedpans for 30 years and never took $1. Gina brought coffee and took a life savings. Do not let anyone tell you the work makes the person. The person makes the person. The building was full of roses. It only takes one Gina. Let me tell you how it ended, because it did not end in a dramatic courtroom, and I have made my peace with that. Once I had the hospital records, the ground shifted entirely, because now it was not my word against a valid document, it was a valid document against a wristband, and a wristband wins. I brought it to a lawyer and then to the authorities who handle exactly this, and I want to say that the moment there was a fact instead of a feeling, everyone moved, the facility, the state, all of it, because these institutions are not built to act on a son's suspicion, but they are absolutely built to act on a document that could not physically be true. The power of attorney was voided. The money that could be traced was pursued. And Gina, who had been so careful with every warm thing and so careless with one cold date, faced what the law does to a person who steals from the old under the color of care, which is real and serious, and I will not pretend I felt nothing watching it, because I felt everything. But the money was almost the smallest part. Here is the part one actually carry. When it was over, I sat with my father on a good day, one of his clearer days, and I did not tell him the worst of it, because there is no reason to hand a fragile old man the knowledge that the person who brought him coffee was emptying his accounts. But I told him he was safe, that I had it handled, that nobody was going to take what he'd worked for. And my father, who could not always find my name anymore, looked at me and he said, "You came, just that. You came." And I understood that the thing she had truly stolen, the thing no court could give back, was not the money. It was the 2 years. It was the trust my father had spent on her that he could have spent on being suspicious and safe. The warmth he'd given a thief, the gratitude, the light in his face on Sunday phone calls. She took that, and it does not come back, and my father died believing, on his good days, that a kind young woman had once been very good to him, and I let him believe it, because that mercy was the only thing left that I could give him. My name is Marcus Bell, and here is the one thing I need you to carry out of this, and it might save your own parent, so write it down. Know who holds the power. Today. Ask your mother, ask your father, ask them now while you can, who is legally allowed to act for you, and get a copy and read it and check it every single year, because a power of attorney is the most dangerous piece of paper in an old person's life. It is a key to everything they own, and the people who prey on the old do not break in, they get handed the key by a confused, grateful, lonely person who thinks they are thanking a friend. And if something ever feels wrong, if the paper says one thing and your bones say another, do not let the cold voice tell you it's your fault for not being there. Trust the man over the document, and then go find the one small cold fact that the document forgot to check, because there is almost always one, a date, a wristband, a record that never learned to lie, and it is heavier than every warm thing a thief can build. So let me leave you with the question I still turn over at night. If someone is kind to the person you love, genuinely, warmly, daily kind, and you are far away and grateful and relieved, how do you stay grateful and stay watchful at the same time? Because I got so lucky, I got a hospital and a wristband and a date on a Tuesday, and most people don't. Most of these thefts are dated on days the old man really was in the building, and they never come undone. So tell me in the comments, honestly, how do we protect the ones we love from the people who learn to look exactly like love? Because the ones who do this are not caught by suspicion. They are caught by dates. And the rest of the time, they are simply thanked out loud by the very people they are robbing right up to the end.